If you love Baltimore sports, you'll love WNST.net.
Is today the day? I'm sure Kevin Burns knocking on the door saying it's today the day.
He was, actually.
I'm sure it's his job is to try to figure out the day. We came here on Monday morning thinking you had two candidates. By, I guess, noon, we're watching the press conference on the feed. Nobody in our company Ryan went over for a little bit, but after getting up at 5 in the morning being here, we didn't get to ask any questions. And if I were going to ask a question, I would have said, what was the timeline for Gary Kubiak? Who brought him in? How did he get brought in? Now, I read Kevin's column that Dennison had but some connection to that. Can you pull us behind the curtains, given all the crap that was said this week that we've refuted, that you've refuted in regard to Mike Preston's comments? What happened? What was the timeline? When did his name come up?
Well, Saturday. I mean, that's when it got heated up. You know, the whole thing, what I've learned through this whole thing is that you just can't really predict any of it. You know, it's going to take on a life of its own. It's going to go in a direction of its own, and you just don't know where it's going to go. And I think I found out, unless you got a guy in mind that's a slam dunk and you're going to make the move, like we have done with our defensive coordinators over the years, then you better take your time and find everybody. Because if we had done the thing at any point in time until we did, then we wouldn't have gotten Gary Kubiak. So actually, I called Rick Dennison on Wednesday, the week before, to ask him about Kyle Shanahan. And Kyle had done a great job in the interview, and it was after he did the interview, and I really liked him. I liked everything he said. We had a great day together, and I just wanted to find out about it because I've known Rick for a long time through the special teams and coaching and all that. So I just asked him what he thought, and we talked about Gary. You know, and Gary was going through the head coaching things. He told me he had been through the head coaching search. I can't remember exactly the details. I don't think he told me the details, but he didn't get one of those jobs. He said he had turned down a couple of coordinator jobs, and he just wasn't sure. Maybe he was going to sit out. It's like, okay, you know, and that was the conversation. And then things kind of kept going. We had more interviews on Thursday and Friday, second interviews for guys. And on Saturday, some other names came into it, actually. There was another coordinator that came up.
An NFC coordinator.
Everybody probably knows who that is now, you know, I guess. Am I allowed to say it now?
I think you are.
All right. Who do you think it was?
Well, actually, I don't know. That's the funny part.
I don't know. I got a 1 in 16 shot.
Yeah, I really can't say.
Okay, fair enough.
I don't think most people know. It doesn't really matter. So in other words, that came around, the net fell through, and then I'm just sitting there thinking, you know, what are we going to do? You know, should we make a decision or should we kind of keep going? And then I thought, you know, I'm going to give Rick a call and Gary to see what he thinks. And I called him back, and he said, you know, Gary might be interested. So I got off the phone. He gave me Gary's number.
Well, that's a heck of a thing for Rick because he's trying to get the job, and now he's recommending.
No, Rick he wasn't involved in the coordinator job
at all. Okay.
Yeah, I was calling him about Kyle Shanahan.
All right, but it was reported that way.
Yeah. No,
I heard a coach that said we had some erroneous things going on Monday.
Erroneous and fictitious.
Yeah, erroneous and fictitious.
You guys had no fictitious.
Right, because we weren't there to ask questions.
Right.
Clearly we weren't part of it.
We like the truth. That's really what we do. We kind of built our whole gig. Every word in that book I wanted to be true. That's what we try to do. But when we get lied to, then we have to figure out where the middle is. So
was it Linehan that you were referring to, by the way? Was that because that was the name that was out there, was Scott Linehan? That you were just referring to as far as NFC?
No. He's actually Bill Callahan. So,
okay.
I guess it's out there. So,
okay.
It was Bill Callahan. So Scott Linehan was involved. He interviewed Scott Linehan along with other guys. And then when those four names came out, those are the four guys that were in it.
Right.
I mean, it's funny because everybody was saying, hey, why don't you let people know what's going on? You know, and sometimes what you do is you put names out there and you feel bad about it because those guys don't get the job and it's kind of somewhat embarrassing for them or whatever. So there's a lot of considerations to make. And we figured at least we could put the four finalists out there. That would reflect well on them, and that's where I thought it was going to be. We all thought it would come from one of those guys. And then we had the second interviews. It was all good. We started thinking about it. Thought about Gary. Called Rick. What do you think? Think he's interested? Called Gary. Phone was busy.
someone else calling him, right? Dude needs call waiting.
Yeah. So I left a message, called me back, and he called back and said he was on the phone with Rick Dennison. So Rick had called him like the second we get off the phone.
Wait a second, Rick.
Yeah.
We're trying to call your guy.
Yeah.
Right.
So we just had a long talk on the phone, and just, you know, you never know. I mean, Gary and I haven't known each other that well. I just always knew he was a nice guy.
How do you know? How give me the whole basis of.
I just know him as a head coach, you know, just in the last years.
See him at the owners' meetings kind of thing?
Owners' meetings and playing, you know, when we play, we talk to him before the game. That's really all I know.
You really don't know him at all?
I don't know him at all. So I didn't have a sense that he'd be interested early on. I just didn't have a sense of that. Then I knew he was involved in some other things. So I just think the timing was right. But he was excited. We started talking football. We were kind of on the same page. I think our call came right at the right time, and I just was so incredibly impressed with this guy. And you know what? He ends up being our offensive coordinator, so it was great.
John Harbaugh joins us live here on the Reality Check, driven by Jerry's Toyota Scion on WNST.net. Coach, can you describe the call? I mean, was it a I have to convince him? Was it a he was interested the moment you made the call? Can you share any of that?
Yeah, it was the latter. He was interested.
Okay.
Which right away I could sense that and felt good about it. And I said, hey, Gary, I'm calling about our offensive coordinator position. Would you be interested? Right to the point. You know? Right. And he said, I would. I sure would. So we got to talking. And he kind of took me through the history of from the time when he got sick a little bit through the end of the season when they let him go and what he'd been doing. He made a big point that his wife had pretty much gotten sick of him, so he was done. He needed to get back to work. She was ready to throw him out of the house. But we talked about just mutual thoughts on offense. And we talked about running the ball. We talked about play action pass. We talked about the system. We talked about the way they use their six-man protections on third down a little bit, just to see if we're on the same page. Because when you play somebody, you kind of know how to do things. And there were some things I'm like, I don't know if that's going to fit us. Is that going to work for us? And he explained, what was important to him and what wasn't and stuff like that. And it just got to the point where I'm thinking, I didn't know if our systems would merge. But then I'm thinking after talking to him, this is like a perfect fit.
Wow. So, we take on the heat and the phone calls and trying to explain stuff. You're here now, you don't come off and get it in your words. I had a guy in that corner an hour ago, a big Raven fan who owns a media company, a national company, he's from Baltimore. He asked me what was going on, and I said, well, Preston's full of manure, and he says, I happen to know that Steve Bisciotti was involved. Now, this is a guy who doesn't know you, doesn't know Steve, doesn't know Ozzie, probably never talked to any of you. And I said to him, I kind of happen to know that, you're just wrong. Well, I have a source. And I said, well, whoever your source is wrong. And he said, well, Harbaugh doesn't like to hire, accomplished guys and previous head coaches. And I shook my head.
Like
and I
Cam
said,
Cameron.
Like former head coach.
Like Cam Cameron, Spagnuolo, down the line. And now you talk coordinators, there's Callahan, Linehan. Just down the line, it seems to me that that's all you try to surround yourself with are people who've been up the mountain before. And I just scratch Jim Zorn. I scratch my head at the notion of that.
Well, if you were making the other argument that I do too much of that I'm always hiring former head coaches or former coordinators, how about Rex Ryan? That was a pretty gutsy hire.
You got Mike the same job.
You're exactly right. So we had fun. We have 5 former head coaches that have been through here. So
what's the value in those guys? Like really, on a day-to-day basis for you, have they had sat in your seat?
Well, there's a value because they've been there before and they understand the decisions you have to make. If you haven't been in that seat, sometimes you can't see it from that perspective. But the bigger values are usually really great coaches. And to me, I want to have the best coaches we possibly can. And I think if you go back over the last 6 years, all told, it'd be hard to find better 6 years of coaching staffs than the Ravens have had. So criticize me the other way. Say that I need great coaches around me to be successful. But don't say that I'm hiring bad coaches or guys that won't speak their opinion. It's definitely insulting. It's really stupid. It's reflective of I don't say not knowing the facts. It's the people are putting out there know darn well what they're saying, and they know it's not true.
Let me ask you this. In every organization, you would think there'd be a level of conversation. And here's what I tried to say when everyone was talking about this. My gut would tell me that you run something off of Ozzie, that you would run something off of Steve when you make it, that here's where the conversation could happen. And sure, those guys would be involved because you guys all seem like guys that talk to each other. Is there truth there?
Well, how did Steve Bisciotti build one of the biggest companies in the world?
By having a good group of people.
Well, what's his company though? It's human resources, right? It's people. It's hiring. It's hiring. It's staffing. It's hiring people. That's what he does. So, of course he's going to have a lot of insight into that. And you'd be pretty dumb not to listen to it. And Steve and I talk, probably through that process more than we usually do. We probably talk every other night or so. Sometimes we talk every day. Sometimes it might be 3 days we wouldn't talk. So he knew what was going on, who we were interviewing, asking me questions. You've talked to this guy, have you talked to that guy? Why haven't you talked to him? Are you going to talk to him? He wanted to know all that, and he'd give me advice. And his biggest piece of advice was if you weren't going to hire right away out of the gates, if you didn't know who you had, then take a thorough process on, very similar to the one that they used when they hired me in '08, and he kind of laid out to me how that works. So that was really great. It was very helpful in terms of how to go about doing it, And that was really it. I mean, he didn't give me any interview questions or anything like that, and he certainly didn't say who to hire.
If you love Baltimore sports, you'll love WNST.net.